So here's a cool bit of aspect of history. We're here at the Derry Presbyterian Church and Churchyard. This is the old sessions house. This would have been the original like pastoral study. Also, they would have had probably their Sunday school. How they fit so many people in there, I don't know. But this is actually put in glass. I believe these are probably windows from the old factory. Milton Hershey was actually the one that was responsible for making sure that this place was preserved. And they put it within this structure just to keep it from fading away. And it is on the National Registry of Historic Places. And we're going to go over here into the Derry Presbyterian Churchyard, just go through and check out this beautiful and amazing cemetery and some of the cool people that are buried here. Here on July 4th is the second part of our video. This is where sort of Cliff had been after me for a while to start the channel, and this was a place, first time after the first surgery where I almost died at Milton Hershey. He was taking me to get my PICC lines done and stuff like that. And this was the first place we stopped and we talked about, I need to do this. And then here you have the Revolutionary War soldiers. They also have the French and Indian War. I don't know if they have a French and Indian War plaque here, but there are a lot of people that maybe it even had denotes, like also frontiersmen as the thing here where it would be next to these guys. These are guys that were actually in the French and Indian War as well. Very, very cool. So, anyways, and this is where Colonel John Rogers is buried. So let's go in here if I can figure out how to open this, because that has not always worked out well for me in the past. And we'll visit some of the cool. Somebody actually came in here and cleaned a bunch of these headstones up, because you can see the ones that are really, really white. They were not like that the last time I was in here, so this is impressive that they've done all this work here. We'll take you to Colonel John Rogers here in a second, but these are veterans of different wars, and then you have where that would be Revolutionary War. Yes, indeed. Colonel John Rogers should be like right over here. His is actually down in the ground unless they've put it back up. It was one, thankfully, you could read. I'm just not sure where it is now. Cool thing to note, they say over in that corner of the cemetery is where they would bury the Native Americans that were killed in raids and things like that were coming through the Manda Gap. And they would sort of pile them up, so the Native Americans would have no idea how many of their friends had been killed. It was just a way that they did stuff back then. That is a really neat script. This is John Rogers. They pulled the stone back up. That is so cool. Memory of Colonel John Rogers. That is absolutely phenomenal. Yeah, because this was originally laying flat on the ground, and they pulled it out and they put it back up. So they did a lot of really, really good work. So Deborah Hershey, I believe it was Debbie Hershey. I'm sorry if I don't have your name right, but I believe you're the one that we talked about. There is a guy here, I think it's a James McCord. He was the grandson of a Scottish chieftain. I believe they're her descendants. She actually is one of the people that takes care of this place. And thank you to you, thank you to the other folks that are doing this, because the work you do in preserving these stones, making them readable again, helping us to remember, putting John Rogers' stone back up like that your work is phenomenal. So thank you. Thank you to the Daughters of America Revolution for everything they do, Sons of the American Revolution. They look after places like this, and they make sure that we don't forget our ancestors, our predecessors. We're here because of them, and it's just this work that they've done on these stones is beautiful. I'm so happy we came out here. I want to show you a couple of these really beautiful, unique stones, but this is where you have a lot of the newer, obviously the newer stones that they've added in here. There are a couple people in here I'd like to talk about. Everybody's of note, but there's one individual in particular. He's actually involved, I believe, with Hershey Trust, did a lot of really phenomenal work. But this would have been the corner once again. There are people buried there. Whether that's local legend or it's actual truth, I don't really know. But it wouldn't shock me. This I can't stand. Like, why people have to be so ignorant. Here, let me throw my trash down in a cemetery. Just ignorant, but ignorant and disrespectful. But we'll take that and get rid of that then. This is one that stood out to me, that little, this, once again, it's the iconography. All that has meaning. It's so beautiful, so well done. Like this one has sort of the plinth, and then there's, you know, how they did it. It looks like a real, you know, cloth hanging up over there as the books, like probably the Bible and that type. That's just very, very cool. Did such a phenomenal job. But I talked about the McCord earlier, and it's James McCord. His father, I'll get to the story at some point, we'll come back. I don't think the stone, on Find a Grave, they don't have the stone pictured, so probably the stone no longer exists. But he was the grandson of a Scottish chieftain, and they had a battle with the English, and his father was killed. I don't know, it was the Battle of Killarney or something like that. Killarney, not the pronunciation correct. There's a William McCord. Oh, that's the guy. He's a senator, actually. He also served as a veteran in the War of 1812, but he was one of our first senators here in Pennsylvania. That's actually really, really cool. I've actually found that now. You couldn't read this the last time. So that's, wow. And you think he's probably a descendant of the James McCord, you would think, that came here. And they had to come here because if they had stayed in Scotland, most likely they would have been hunted down by the English crown and killed. So they were forced to come to the new country and find safety and serenity here. And because of them, most likely William McCord is a descendant of that James McCord, of that Scottish chieftain. He wound up becoming one of our first state senators. And that would have been a United States senator, not a Pennsylvania senator, just to clarify. I love these stones here, are just stunning. I don't know what kind, maybe one of you guys can answer what kind of stone that is, if that is like a marble. But you just look at the for better, lack of a better term, the marbling on these stones. That is just, wow. I know a lot of people find it somewhat morbid when you go to cemeteries and stuff like that, but I just find these type of places just extraordinary. It just, the history aspect of it is just amazing, and just all the lives these people led, really, wow. And once again, I can't say thank you enough to the people that have done this work. Like, preserving these stones, you can actually read them now, and it's history being preserved. It's these people's legacies being preserved, and how important that is. This is what this channel is about. It's about bringing about awareness, remembering those who have come before us, and not forgetting our history. But we will come back. I want to do more research on the cemetery, and then tell you more of the stories of the individuals that are here, the lives they led, all those types of things. There is over here in the corner, we'll note, I think Thomas Bertram, the first pastor of the church, is buried over here. He was originally, I think, from Scotland or Ireland. It says it on the sign. Probably Scotland, because I think this was a lot of Scottish people in this area. But he is buried here, their first pastor. Actually, John Elder as well was a pastor here. He was known as the Fighting Parson, and he was the one that sort of got the Paxton boys going. Claims he didn't necessarily intend for them to become what they were, because they became rather murderous and did a lot of really bad things. But he was primarily the pastor over at the Paxton Presbyterian Church, but he also served. Alright, so my phone, because of the heat, was not happy. So continue here. There's John Jones, I mentioned him. Over in this corner, though, is very, very cool. There's two very, very important people, including the pastor that I mentioned, William Bertram. He is buried here. This is the first pastor of this Derry Presbyterian. I believe was born over in Scotland and then came over here. Over here we have James Galbraith Sr. and his son. James Galbraith was the esquire for this area during colonial times, which means he basically took care of all the legal proceedings for this area in communication with the Quaker government. And he was known, there's a letter that still exists out there where he pleaded with the Quaker government when they weren't understanding how bad the situation was, because they felt everything could have a peaceful solution. Unfortunately, this led to the French and Indian War of their misunderstanding, because they were very much peace, peace, peace. He had pleaded, could we have a militia, someone to defend us from these attacks coming from the Man of the Gap? At the very least, can you provide us with rifles so we can protect ourselves? And unfortunately, that didn't happen. And eventually, they did do Fort Manada, Fort Swatara, but at that point, it was too late. There were a lot of people that had been killed in those attacks, and James Galbraith was the one that was responsible. And most likely, he is the one that Colonel John Rogers, is buried here. He should have been buried over in Old Hanover Presbyterian Churchyard, because that was his church. Unfortunately, probably came over here in the summer to visit and died, and because they didn't have ways of preserving the body, especially in the summer months, he most likely is buried here because he was visiting one of those two men, very important individuals in this area. So we're going to go on to our third place, which will be Heidelberg Hall, or the Weagley Mansion, and go from there. Thanks, everybody.